Hello again, Harry Potter fans. Welcome back to our page. We are continuing on with Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker. And here we are with Chapter 10, Trials Unforeseen.
Chapter 10, Trials Unforeseen. Chapter text. Do not lose your temper. I won't. Answer their questions with as few words as possible. All right. Stay calm. If they try to badger you, maintain your cool. Okay, Harry said, annoyed. He and Dumbledore had gone through this before, twice. It was the 3rd of February, and the slow-moving ministry had finally decided to have a trial for Peter Pettigrew. Harry, Ginny, and Ron had been ordered to attend and give witness to the events that had happened the day after Christmas. I won't lose my temper. I'll answer their questions with as few words as possible, and I'll stay cool. I promise. Me too, Ron said. Ginny echoed him. They were in Dumbledore's office preparing to travel by flue to testify against Peter Pettigrew before the Wisingamot. Harry had his best pair of robes on and had even attempted to flatten his hair. Ginny had pulled her hair up into a messy bun. She looked fresh-faced and very young. Ron, however, had not bothered with his appearance as much as the other two had. Ginny pointed her wand at him and somehow managed to make him look neater. Why'd you do that? Ron asked. I don't care how I look in front of those ministry nutters. I know you don't, Ginny assured him. But Mum will. Ron stared at her, aghast. Mum's going to be there? Why didn't you say anything? Ginny gaped at him. How long have you known Mum? Do you really think that she'll let us be witnesses in the most important trial of the last decade without being there? Ron groaned. I was hoping it would be a closed trial. It is, Dumbledore assured him. But you are an underage witch or wizard, and it is almost a given that your mother will be there. It is frowned upon in the Wisingamot question young people without their parents there. Listen, Dumbledore said. We're leaving in just a few moments. I do not like the fact that the other members in the Wisingamot voted to question you at the trial instead of accepting a written account, as they did your brother Percy's. Do not expect to answer easy questions. I will protect you as best I can. Professor, Harry interrupted. Don't try to protect us too much. That'd look odd, wouldn't it? We'll get through this. Be careful, Dumbledore said as they lined up in front of the fireplace. Harry took a handful of flue powder, stood in the fireplace, shouted his destination, and spun outside of the protection of Hogwarts into the ministry, where his welcome was uncertain at best. Harry, dear. Harry blinked the soot out of his eyes and turned to find Mr. and Mrs. Weasley standing just behind him. Hi, Mrs. Weasley, Harry said. Hi, Mr. Weasley. Come to watch the trial? Of course, Mrs. Weasley said. I can't have my youngest children up in front of the Wisingamot without being there. What kind of mother would I be if I let them go it alone? Thanks, Mum, Ginny said. She walked over and gave her a hug. We're a little nervous. Mrs. Weasley opened her mouth to say something comforting, but it dropped open when she saw her youngest son. Ronald Weasley, you're here to stand witness in a very important trial, not slouch in your common room. What are you wearing? Never would have thought you'd be so stupid. I didn't know you'd be here, Ron said defensively. Perhaps this was the wrong thing to say because Mrs. Weasley grabbed hold of his ear and pulled him forcefully around the corner. Harry could hear Ron sputtering, Mrs. Weasley whispering loudly, and several bangs. Ron rejoined them, looking sheepish and somewhat neater. His robes did not look as though he'd slept in them the night before, and his hair was so tame that it reminded Harry a little of Malfoy's sleek blonde hair. Aren't you glad she didn't see you before Ginny did some damage control? Harry muttered. Ron shuddered. Come on, everyone, Mr. Weasley said. We don't want to be late. Courtroom 10 isn't even reachable by the lift. We got a bit of a walk. As the 5 of them, Dumbledore had headed to the courtroom as soon as he had stepped out of the flue, trooped through the atrium, and got on the lift. Mr. Weasley kept up a steady, light-hearted commentary about the ministry, the history of the building itself, and the various departments contained therein. He clearly sought to set their minds at ease, and Harry was pleasantly surprised to find that it worked. What's this place? Ron asked when they reached the long corridor that led to the Department of Mysteries. The place where the prophecy is held, Harry thought to himself. Where Sirius died, where we fought a battle because I hadn't learned a clemency. That's the Department of Mysteries, Mr. Weasley said. The people who work there are called unspeakables. No one knows what they get up to, hence the name. Ron nodded. Mr. Weasley's words gradually tapered off while they headed down the long flight of stairs, and they eventually walked in silence toward the court. The last time Harry had been here, he had been on trial for underage magic. He'd used the Patronus charm to fight the Dementors that Umbridge had set on him. Umbridge, who had most likely written that article, the one that had cast him in a suspicious light before he had even known, in this timeline, that the odd stuff that he sometimes made happen was magic. Before he'd known about his parents' murders, what his scar had come from, and even Voldemort's name. He wondered if she would be there. Probably, he thought glumly. Still, he straightened his shoulders and attempted to flatten his hair once more before he walked across the threshold. It was crowded with grim-faced witches and wizards, all staring at the center of the room, where Peter Pettigrew sat, chained to a chair. As soon as he entered, though, all eyes turned to him. Harry gulped. Ginny took a deep breath, and he wished he could take her hand. "The witnesses are here," said a woman with a stern voice. She had a monocle pressed to her eye, and Harry recognized her as Amelia Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. "I move to begin the trial of Peter Pettigrew." Pettigrew whimpered as the other witches and wizards murmured their accord. "Miss Ginevra Molly Weasley," Amelia Bones said. "Approach." Ginny walked forward steadily and stopped when she was about a meter away from the dais upon which Minister Fudge, Dumbledore, Amelia Bones, a young, dark-haired wizard, and, Harry's stomach clenched, Dolores Umbridge all sat. "Describe to us the events leading up to the attack." Ginny described it flawlessly. If Harry had not known any better, he would have believed that she was being perfectly honest. "And you were speaking Quidditch?" Amelia Bones asked. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "I had no idea what was going on. It was reported that you were cursed by the man in the center of the room," she pointed. "Can you verify for me that it was indeed him?" Ginny turned her head and stared at Wormtail, who was now quivering so hard that the chains that bound his hands and feet made faint clanking sounds. "Yes," she said assuredly. "He's the man that appeared." "Thank you," she said. "You are released. Ronald Bilious Weasley, please come forward." Harry began to relax. They were doing fine so far. Amelia Bones had not asked probing questions and had taken Ginny at her word. Ginny sat next to him and gave him a very small smile, so quick that he barely noticed it. The questions put to Ron were nearly identical, up until the point that Ginny had been hit by a curse. Harry silently cheered as Ron's voice remained steady. He had clearly taken Dumbledore's advice to heart and said just enough to answer a question and without raising the possibility of more. "So then I used that disarming spell that Professor Lockhart taught us," Ron finished. "And then Harry used magic to tie him up," he said easily. Hem, an all too familiar voice. Harry had to bite his tongue to stop from groaning. Ginny tensed up. "If I may ask a few questions?" Dolores Umbridge said in her sickening sweet tone. "Of course, Under Secretary Umbridge," Amelia Bones said formally. "You claim that Harry Potter used a charm to tie Pettigrew up with magic," Umbridge said. "Where did he learn this charm?" she giggled, a little tinkle of the sound that made Harry want to strangle her. "I do not believe that it is taught to second years." "Don't say anything rude, Ron. Don't do it," Harry prayed. He needn't have feared. "Oh," Ron said. "Harry and I looked through my older brother Percy's spell books." "Why?" she pressed. "Isn't learning the required spells enough of a challenge?" "Well," Ron said, "we're both pretty good at defense against the dark arts, and we wanted to learn more about them." "No other reason?" she asked. She sounded as though she did not believe him. Ron's ears turned bright red, and Harry squeezed his eyes shut. "Well," he looked over at his mother. "My brothers, they like to have a laugh. We thought we'd surprise them." Harry could see heads nodding in the crowd. He wondered if Fred and George knew that their reputation extended beyond Hogwarts. Despite the situation, Harry wanted to grin. "Where did you practice these spells?" "In the common room," Ron said promptly. "Mostly when we knew that they were out flying or at dinner. It was over the holidays." "You practiced on each other?" "Yeah," Ron said slowly. Harry felt a sickening drop in his stomach, though he did not know why. "What is going on here? Do you often allow Harry Potter to tie you up using magic?" Was that? Did she just... Did she just say what I think she just said? Harry gaped at her. Several members of the Wisengamot gasped. Amelia Bones whipped around so fast that her monocle flew out of her hand and hit Ron on the shoulder. Ron bent over and picked it up. Harry could see that his fingers were trembling. He was probably trying to stop himself from doing something he would regret, like attack Umbridge. That was, Madam Bones said furiously. But Molly Weasley stopped her. What exactly are you insinuating about my son? She did not shout, precisely, but the warning and threat was made perfectly clear. She had her wand out, though it was not pointed at Umbridge. Yet, this is a trial, Umbridge said primly, though Harry could see her ugly lips twist in something that might be a smile. The urge to hurt her thundered through his veins. And you are not permitted to speak. I am his mother, Mrs. Weasley said forcefully, and I will not allow you to. Molly Weasley is quite right. Dumbledore spoke for the first time. Harry looked away from Umbridge and caught Minister Fudge look furtively and fearfully at the older wizard. As chief of the Wisengamot, I declare that line of questioning inappropriate. You have our apologies, Mr. Weasley. You may go back to your seat. Ron didn't say anything, but turned and walked toward him. His face was as bright red as his hair, and he had clenched his fist so tightly around a wad of his robes. Harry could only be thankful that he had managed not to draw his wand, that his knuckles were white. There was a flurry of motion and whispering so loud that Harry felt he was sitting next to a large nest of snakes. The only difference being, of course, that he could not understand what they were saying. Amelia Bones conferred urgently with the minister, nervously tapping her returned monocle on the desk in front of her. The only two not speaking to anyone, Harry noticed, was Dumbledore and Umbridge. Dumbledore was watching Pettigrew carefully and did not appear to notice Harry's stare. Umbridge, however, was looking at Harry, and suddenly he was absolutely positive that she had asked Ron that question to humiliate him, and any doubt that still lingered about the author of the article seeped away. The look of satisfaction on her face proved it. Harry James Potter, Madam Bones, sounded flustered. Please approach. Harry looked away from Umbridge and walked forward. His heart was pounding in his chest. He only hoped that he could control himself as Ron had done, but if Umbridge was allowed to question him, he did not know what would happen. Describe the events, please, she said. He did so, careful to keep his voice steady and clear. Dumbledore was right to remind me twice not to get angry, he thought ruefully. He did not even look at Umbridge, but stared straight at Amelia Bones. He could tell, however, that she and the others on the dais, and perhaps Ron and Ginny and their parents, were the only ones who were actually listening. The other witches and wizards were busy whispering to one another. I do not support the line of questioning Undersecretary Umbridge took. She looked troubled. But do you understand why it is a concern for the ministry that you show knowledge of spells that ought to be beyond a second year? Harry decided in a split second to play dumb. No, Madam Bones, I do not. She looked surprised. Surely you are aware of the prophecy? I should have known that this was as much my trial as it is Wormtail's, Harry thought bitterly. Yes, I am. Then you know that the prophecy states that you are in possession of a terrible power that he who must not be named does not know. Yes, Harry said firmly. And you do not think that this would concern the ministry? Well, Harry said slowly. I'm only 12 years old. Madam Bones, Dumbledore said quietly. Mr. Potter is not on trial based on a prophecy made before he was born. Mr. Potter is not, in fact, on trial at all. Harry began to wonder if he was actually here or if he was having nightmare. He pinched himself surreptitiously. Wouldn't that have been nice? Recent allegations. Madam Bones said delicately. If you are referring to the Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore said. I stand by what I said before. Mr. Potter is most definitely not the heir of Slytherin. I am afraid that I cannot permit this questioning to continue. We have a matter of Peter Pettigrew to decide. Question Mr. Potter further, if you wish, but ensure that it is related to the matter at hand. Harry felt grimly satisfied that Dumbledore had enough power to halt this, and even happier that the minister had not once questioned his authority. In fact, Amelia Bones looked chastened rather than angry. She nodded. Very well, she said. No further questions, Mr. Potter. You may leave now if you wish. May I stay? Harry asked. He looked over at Wormtail, who was nibbling on his fingernails. He betrayed my parents. Her expression softened. You may. He returned to his seat, not even daring to look at Ron and Ginny. He knew, without even having to look, that they were both furious. The trial went on without a hitch after that. Amelia Bones questioned him, and he admitted to everything in a shaky voice. He told the crowd of witches and wizards how he had betrayed Lily and James Potter, how he had been tracked down by Sirius Black the next day, and how he had transformed into a rat after he blasted the street, killing the Muggles, and leaving behind a finger to ensure that the Ministry thought him dead. Then he described how he had found the Weasleys and stayed with them. And in December, he had finally grown tired of his ruse and had attempted to escape. The vote deciding his guilt was unanimous. Within 2 hours, Peter Pettigrew had been given a life sentence in Azkaban. Harry was relieved that Dumbledore's conviction that the Ministry would not immediately throw him to the Dementors to receive the kiss held true. Weak-legged with relief and residual anger, Harry made his way back to the atrium with the Weasleys. No one said anything, to his relief. He suspected that Mrs. Weasley was still in a dangerous temper. Now, she said finally when they stood in front of the fireplaces, you three get back to school safely. I expect plenty of people will have questions for you. You don't have to answer them if you don't wish to. Don't let the twins harass you. Write to me if they do. All right, Mum. Ginny smiled at her. Mr. Weasley hugged his children and shook Harry's hand. I've got to run. Remus Lupin asked me to owl him. He knew that I'd be there. Be careful. Goodbye, dears, Mrs. Weasley said. Harry had never been happier to leave the Ministry. Not just for his sake, but for Ron's, who was about to explode. I'm going to kill her, he snarled once they had reached the sanctuary that was Dumbledore's office. You have no idea how close it was. Can you believe? He broke off, apparently too enraged to continue. What happened? Snape asked. He had apparently been waiting for them. Before they could answer, Dumbledore appeared in the flames and stepped out, brushing soot off his scarlet robes. Umbridge accused Harry of buggering me. Ron said, I'm dead certain that she's the one who wrote that article, Harry said. She set out to humiliate me, us, today. Snape looked at Dumbledore. Is this true? I think you are right, Harry, Dumbledore said. From what you have told me, from what I know of her, and what she said today, I am certain of it. And yes, Severus, she very clearly insinuated that Harry and Ron have a sexual relationship. What were her exact words? Ron pretended to think. Oh yeah, do you often let Harry Potter tie you up using magic? I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it. Snape stared at him. And you didn't kill her? You have more control than I thought. No, all three of them behaved with admirable control, Dumbledore said. During Umbridge's questioning, and when Harry was questioned, they spent as much time asking about the prophecy as they did about Pettigrew. I stopped it both times. I can't say that I didn't expect that there would be some allusion to it. I did like Dumbledore told me, Harry said. I tried to use as little words as possible, which is why I was able to step in when I did, said Dumbledore. Had he given more information away, such as attempting to reassure them of his intentions, I would have had to allow it. Why is that? Ginny asked. It would have been off topic anyway. Harry could have left them an opening, Dumbledore said. If he had, there would have been nothing I could say, legally speaking, that would have had any authority behind it. There are different rules for witnesses than there are for criminals on trial. They are not allowed to questions step outside of the bounds. But if the witness himself mentions it, such as, Harry, if you had said that you were not the heir of Slytherin, or if you had used your experience with the Philosopher's Stone to attempt to convince them, then Madame Bones would have had every right to pursue it. Good for you, Harry, Ron said. You kept your mouth shut. I was too worried about killing Umbridge, Harry said. Well, Ginny said, at least that's over. We know why they insisted on having Harry, Ron, and I testify, instead of letting us just send a letter like Percy did. They wanted to question Harry. Indeed, Dumbledore said. Professor, what about Sirius? Harry asked. They're going to free him, right? Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Yes, they are. They were arguing about how they were going to recompense him for his time spent in Azkaban as an innocent man, and for the fact that they did not give him a trial, as I left. I dare say that Sirius will be a free man within days, if not hours. How delightful, Snape said sourly. Harry looked at him. That kind of attitude is exactly why no one in the Order of the Phoenix trusted you, he pointed out. It's true, Ginny nodded. If I can manage not to kill Umbridge, Ron said, then you can be civil to Sirius. Snape scowled, but he didn't hand out real detentions to them for stating the facts. Harry hoped he thought about it, because he would not tolerate enmity between two of his best allies. The room of requirement provided enough space for the six of them to practice dueling each other, for which Harry was very grateful. He stood facing Ginny and knew that she was in just as foul a mood as he was. Two students had been petrified the night before, despite all their efforts to avoid that happening. Dumbledore had been the one to protect the students last night. When the coin had heated up and Ginny had left the common room, Harry had sent a Patronus to Dumbledore. They were working outside of the original timeline now, with the hope that it would cause the events that were to happen come sooner. Dumbledore had cast a very subtle charm that should have caused any student or teacher to immediately realize that they had something to do in the opposite direction. It would have worked had two students not been snogging in a broom closet, now a Ravenclaw, named Jacob Hallwell, and a Hufflepuff, named Emily Gareth were laying in the hospital wing, waiting for the Mandrake potion to restore them to themselves. At least they're only petrified, Harry whispered. She nodded. I know. I still feel awful about it, though. Harry glanced over at Neville, who was dueling with Ron. He felt bad for being surprised that Neville was picking it up quickly. After all, he had been one of the fastest learners in Dumbledore's army. But Neville had never displayed that kind of power at any time until his 5th year. It amazed Harry that Neville had only needed confidence all that time. True, Ron was not really trying. It wouldn't have been fair, not to mention highly suspicious. But Neville now had a firm grasp on both Expelliarmus and Stupefy. Great, Neville, he called when the other boys sent Ron flying back on some cushions. I did that trick with the wand you showed me earlier, Neville said. Hermione looked over. You're a really good teacher, Harry. I didn't think we'd be able to manage this, to be honest. Thanks, he said. What do you say we call it a night? We don't want the Ministry to get suspicious, now, do we? I can't believe what happened to you. Hermione flared up at once. They should have been pleased that you knew how to do that spell. Harry avoided Ron's eyes. Not that there was a chance that he was looking at him. What Umbridge had said had not remained a secret at all. None of them had said anything, but some of the students, like Susan Bones and Marietta Edgecombe, had had parents at the trial. It had spread around the school like wildfire, and the taunts and sneers, combined with the fear and suspicion, had contributed to Harry's foul mood as much as the fact that students had been petrified. Umbridge's plan to humiliate him had certainly worked. That bitch, he thought. It had been 3 weeks since the trial, but it had felt like 3 years. Please let the rumors die down soon. His anger propelled him to the Gryffindor common room, where he was met with both laughter and nervous looks. This did not help. He shoved past a couple of first years and stomped up the stairs. Going to bed, Potter? Someone asked, laughing. Probably an especially brave 7th year. And Weasley's going to? You better go up there too, Longbottom. They may need a chaperone. SHHHHH, someone hissed. Yeah, shut the hell up about my brother, Levins, Fred said loudly. Or, do you want to see what we'll do to you? George said just as loudly. Ron slammed the door behind them so hard that it almost shattered the wood. He rummaged angrily through his trunk and pulled out his pajamas. He was muttering something under his breath, but Harry couldn't make out what he was saying. What's that? He asked. Just fantasizing about how I'm going to tear her limb from limb, he said darkly. Harry had no doubt that he was talking about Umbridge. Ah, I was thinking the same thing, Harry said. He lay back in his bed and took off his glasses. I'm going to do it slowly. I'll make sure it hurts a lot, Ron said. Then he paused. How's Ginny holding up? She's doing all right, Harry said. Shook up about Hallwell and Gareth. She said she's going to write in the diary again tomorrow. I can't believe I'm saying this, Ron said, since she'll be in danger and all, but I hope it happens tomorrow. What if someone's killed next time? I know, Harry said. The thought still made icy fear flood his belly. Instead, it was 3 days later, just as Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville left the Transfiguration classroom, their last class of the day. The coin in his pocket burst with heat. Harry exchanged glances with Ron. He had a feeling, although he did not know for sure, that this was it. Damn! Ron slapped his hand to his forehead. We've got to go. Snape will kill us. Harry gaped at him. Oh, our detention. Sorry, they said in unison to their bewildered friends, and sped off. As they turned the corner, they heard Hermione say, "They've got detention again? They must be in a hurry," Neville said. "They're going the wrong way to the dungeons." Harry and Ron walked quickly and found an empty classroom. Harry pulled out his invisibility cloak and, checking to make sure the coast was clear, threw it over himself and Ron. They hurried in and closed the door. He pulled out his wand and whispered Expecto Patronum, and a stag appeared in front of them. Tell Dumbledore this. In classroom near Transfiguration. It took Dumbledore 15 minutes to reach them. It felt like 20 years. I think this is it, Harry told him. Ginny was writing in it. She usually only takes about 3 minutes. But the coin is still hot. Either he's taken her down there to lure me, or he's going to unleash the basilisk. We're still going to have to wait, Dumbledore said. I taught it last time, you know. It took the basilisk almost an hour to appear in the corridor. I'll set the spell so that if it makes an appearance, we will know that this is not the time. And no, he continued when Harry opened his mouth, we will ensure that this is, in fact, the time before you two run off. Fine, Harry said. They sat back as Dumbledore waved his wand. Cassin Sentia, he said, and a brilliant white light streamed from his wand and went straight through the walls. That will alert me of anything bigger than a human in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, he explained. Then Protego Horribilis, he said, and a great wind stirred up around them. It too fled. I'm not taking chances again, he said grimly. I've effectively stopped anything from getting out of that bathroom and getting in. I've also blocked off the corridor around it, 15 meters from the door. Once we have confirmation, I will take it down so you can go. All students return to your dormitories at once. 20 minutes later, McGonagall's voice startled Harry so much that he toppled off the desk upon which he sat. All students return to your dormitories at once. Prefects ensure that they do so. This is it, Harry said quietly. Finally. She said that the last time, but I don't know how she knew already. Very well, Dumbledore said. He gazed down at Harry and Ron, and then let his eyes linger on Harry. He opened his mouth to speak, but closed it again. Good luck, he said finally. They almost literally ran into Minerva McGonagall the moment they sped out of the room. Ron, who was fastest, threw himself to the side to avoid her and crashed into the wall instead. She looked quite worried, Harry saw. Wispy tendrils fell around her face where her hair had fallen out of her ever-present bun, and her mouth was not pressed into a firm line, but was slightly parted. Her eyes were filled with concern. Albus, she cried, as soon as she saw Dumbledore. The worst has happened. A student has been taken into the Chamber of Secrets. Who? Dumbledore asked sharply. Her eyes darted from Ron to Harry. Ginny Weasley, she said in a low voice. My sister, Ron shouted, but McGonagall continued. I was walking with a student when I saw Ginny Weasley walk into that bathroom none of the girls want to go into, the one that is haunted by Moaning Myrtle. I thought it was odd, but then I saw that there was a new message written on the wall. Her skeleton will remain in the chamber forever. Albus, this is the end of the school, I fear. Minerva, listen to me, Dumbledore said urgently. She ignored him. I ran into Gilderoy. He says he'll retrieve her, but I sincerely doubt that. He'll be in his office, getting ready to flee. What are we going to do? Whatever the monster is, it made it so I couldn't even try to follow. I was pushed back. Minerva, alert the Weasleys, Dumbledore interrupted, and go to my office. I will meet you there. Tell them to come immediately. She nodded. Then, remembering herself, she turned on Harry and Ron. Get back to your dormitories. Now, her voice softened. Mr. Weasley, we'll do everything we can. Harry and Ron did not need to hear another word, but left. Harry turned back once and saw such a look of helplessness on her face that he longed to tell her not to worry. He'd bring Ginny back and defeat the basilisk. Instead, he followed Ron. As soon as they rounded the corner, They both began sprinting. Harry did not remember drawing his wand, but it was out, and he grasped it firmly. Hogwarts had never seemed larger. They went down the stairs 3 at a time. Had there been any other students about, there would have been injuries, he was sure. They set off down the 3rd-floor corridor near the hospital wing and the defense classes. The halls were still, mercifully, empty. "Harry! Ron!" Neville shouted. Harry ran right into Ron when he slowed, and they both fell hard, smacking the stones. "Neville," he said. Neville's face was bright red and sweaty, as if he too had been running. "I've been looking." Neville bent over and gasped for breath. "For you ever since. Ginny, she's been taken. I saw it. The monster took her." "We know," Harry and Ron said at once. "We're going to rescue her," Harry told him. "Don't worry." "But—" "No time, Neville," Ron bellowed. "We know where it's taken her." "Let me come with you," Neville said at once, as he clutched a stitch in his side. "No," Ron shouted. "Don't worry. We won't let anything happen. I care about Ginny too," Neville shouted. Harry stared at him, stunned. He didn't think he'd ever seen Neville truly angry before. Not now, and not then. His face was almost purple, and his fists were clenched, as if he were about to start throwing punches. "Neville," Ron began. "Don't Neville me." He turned on Harry and pointed at him. Harry couldn't help but flinch. "Isn't this why you've been helping us? So we can make a difference?" Harry didn't bother trying to deny it. Neville had expressed these same sentiments when Harry had tried to talk him out of coming to the Department of Mysteries with him. He'd been right then, and if Harry and Ron had not traveled from the future, he'd be right now. He looked at Ron pleadingly. Or was it just a lie? Neville asked. Behind the anger, Harry saw a deep reservoir of hurt and insecurity. If he continued to refuse Neville, if he and Ron walked away from him, something would break inside him. Perhaps not their friendship, but the small bit of confidence that Neville had gained from mastering several spells would be lost. They couldn't tell him that they knew what was happening, not without giving themselves away. Harry really only had one choice. "All right," Harry said quietly. "What?" Ron said blankly. Harry shook his head at him. "Neville's right," he said. "He cares about Ginny, too. You should come with us." They marched on in silence. Harry kept jerking at small sounds, expecting Hermione and Luna to pop out from behind a door, or a tapestry, or a suit of armor and demand to go with them. He thought very quickly. Ron can keep him occupied, he thought. I can go on ahead, and Ron can stop Neville from following. Somehow, do you really know where the Chamber of Secrets is? Neville asked hesitantly. Yeah, Ron said roughly. It's in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Isn't that a girl's bathroom? Neville asked. If Harry had not been so petrified that something would go wrong, he may have laughed. Neville sounded more horrified about going into a girl's bathroom than meeting a basilisk, although he didn't know it was a basilisk that they would be facing. There's a basilisk in there, Harry said. Do you know what that is? When Neville shook his head, Ron said, it's a giant snake that can kill people with its eyes. And its fangs are poisonous too. Ron said this very harshly, and Harry could tell that he was trying to get Neville to back out while he still could. Waste of an effort, Harry thought. Neville's not a coward. How did you figure this out? It's a snake, Harry said quietly. I can hear it. That's what that voice I've been hearing is. It's been moving around in the pipes. That's why no one can see it. But how do you know it's a basilisk? Neville pressed. Ron said. We overheard Dumbledore talking to McGonagall. He was listing all the things that could have done it. And I know what a basilisk is, and then I realized that if Harry has been hearing it, then a snake is the best bet. Ron's nerves were interfering with his ability to lie, and Harry was glad when he stopped talking. Thankfully, Neville did not have any more questions. Terrible images of Ginny lying as still as death on the dirty floor of the Chamber of Secrets kept popping up behind his eyes. His heart was in danger of leaping out of his chest. Professor Lockhart, Neville said loudly. Ron groaned. Neville, look, he's leaving, Neville said indignantly. He's supposed to be helping Ginny, too. He's got his trunk. There was no chance at all that they were going to avoid this. Lockhart was less than 10 feet away and staring at them with shock. His face was pale, and his usually perfectly tended hair was mussed. His eyes were wild, and all he seemed capable of was staring at them. He had dropped his overflowing trunk onto his foot, and he had not even noticed. Ron sighed. "What the hell are you doing, Lockhart?" he asked. "Aren't you supposed to be helping my sister?" "Urgent business, got to run," he said weakly. "You're the defense against the dark arts teacher," Neville said. "You told the other professors that you were going to help. You don't understand." Harry drew his wand. "I understand perfectly. You're a fraud." Lockhart twitched, reaching for his wand. "Expelliarmus." "You're coming with us," Ron said roughly, pocketing Lockhart's wand after catching it. "You can leave your trunk here. I'm sure you'll need it when you're sacked. Good thing it's packed already." It's not that bad that he's here again, Harry thought when they finally reached the corridor. He felt a faint twinge of unease. He shook his head. Stay focused on Ginny, the diary, and the basilisk. It took them another 5 minutes to reach the end of the corridor. Harry could see the doors that led to the bathroom and the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. They were closed. "The monster," Neville said nervously. It made it so McGonagall couldn't follow Ginny. She just bounced right off it. "We'll try anyway," Ron said harshly. Dumbledore had already taken down his enchantment. He must have expected that Ron and Harry had already reached it. He had obviously not expected that they had picked up 2 others. Harry narrowed his eyes and stared at Lockhart. "Come on, Harry." He shook his head sharply and moved on. Neville walked with his hand out, obviously expecting to be pushed back at any moment. Lockhart kept whimpering and muttering things under his breath that Harry did not particularly want to hear. Ron pulled open the door and, wand still pointed at Lockhart, ushered them in. Harry looked around the familiar room. It was dingy and poorly lit and smelled faintly of something unpleasant, just as he'd remembered. "Where do you reckon it is?" Harry asked Ron. "You said you knew," Neville accused. "We know it's in this bathroom, but we haven't quite figured out where." Harry lied. He pretended to think. "If it's going through the pipes." Lockhart said in a faint voice. Ron jabbed his wand at him. "Shut up," he growled, then looked at Harry. "Maybe over by the sink? If it isn't there, we can check the toilets." Harry nodded. He made a cursory examination of the sinks, ignoring the fact that Moaning Myrtle had joined them. "You're not supposed to be here," she said in a sing-song voice. "This is a girl's bathroom." Neville muttered his agreement. "Found it," Harry said when he had taken enough time looking for the small snake that decorated the tap on one of the sinks. "Look, it looks like a snake. Reckon I should use parcel tongue." He gritted his teeth. He glanced over at Neville, who looked very pale. "You don't have to come, Neville," he pointed out. "I'm coming." Neville tried to say it firmly, but it came out as a question. Then, when Ron opened his mouth, he said, "I'm coming." "Open," Harry said. All 4 watched in silence as the sink moved away, revealing the large mouth of a pipe that looked like a maw, waiting to swallow them and enclose them in darkness. "You first," Ron said to Lockhart. "Isn't necessary, boys." Lockhart quivered. When Harry raised his wand, and a split second later, Neville did, he swallowed. With a moan, he jumped in and disappeared. "I'll go next," Ron said. "Don't want him to get into trouble down there." "I'll go," Neville said. He took a deep breath and followed Ron. Harry could hear him scream all the way down. Once he heard voices echoing oddly up through the pipe, he climbed in and slid. His robes were caked in slime and filth, and Harry had to breathe through his mouth for several moments. The faint, unpleasant smell in the bathroom was nothing compared to the stench. He'd forgotten. "Ugh," Lockhart said. "What is that awful smell?" "The basilisk," Ron said casually. "Not only can it kill you if it looks you in the eye, it smells too." Lockhart whimpered. "Lumos," Harry whispered, and his wand immediately lit up. It cast an eerie light that shimmered on the wet walls. "I'd think we're under the lake," Neville said. Harry marched forward toward the tunnel. "Maybe we can pretend that only I can go forward once we reach that other door," he thought. Or, Neville screamed, and Harry whipped around. He and Lockhart both had their hands pressed tightly over their eyes. Harry turned around again and saw the skin that the basilisk had shed. It covered the entire path. They would have to step over it. But wait. He heard Lockhart's knees hit the ground and scrape against the bones of the small animals that littered the tunnel. It's just Lockhart, he thought, but that feeling of unease had grown. His heart thumped. and his instincts were on full alert. Suddenly, with a rush of understanding, he spun around. "Ron, your wand," he shouted. He saw Ron's shocked face in the light that came from his wand, but it was Neville who cried out. "Obliviate!" Harry was simply too slow. He tried to dodge it, to throw himself out of the way, but the bright white light of the memory charm hit him full on the face. He could feel it seeping into his brain. "No, no, no," he heard his own voice say. He put his hands over his head, trying to protect it, but it was too late. The memories flickered past his closed eyelids, and he could only feel horror and impotent rage. The chamber, Tom Riddle, the diary, Ginny lying as though dead on the floor, the sword they slipped away. He couldn't hold the memories in, and in a second they were gone.
Hello there, Harry Potter fans. Welcome back to our page. Here we are with Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker, Chapter 11, Interlude, Albus Dumbledore.
Chapter 11. Interlude, Albus Dumbledore. Chapter text. Albus Dumbledore paced his office, trying not to listen to the broken sobs of Molly Weasley. When the Weasleys had first arrived, he had been confident that Ginny Weasley would be found safe and sound. Harry Potter and Ron Weasley would bring her back to the office, where a joyful reunion would be shared by all. He checked his watch he had bought for himself on his 17th birthday for the 5th time in as many minutes. He had last seen Harry and Ron outside a Transfiguration classroom. That was 3 hours ago. What had gone wrong? Though the thought was terrible, Albus could not help but consider the possibility that all three were lost. True, Harry and Ron might have been petrified. They both knew very well not to look at the basilisk. But the basilisk still had fangs, and the diary was slowly sapping Ginny Weasley's life away. "One more thing," he muttered to the Weasleys, who did not appear to be listening to him. He knew it was desperate. He knew that even the Elder Wand had its limits. But he gathered up as much force as he could, whispered, "Hominum revelio," and sent it through the walls in the direction of the Chamber of Secrets. Nothing. He looked at Fawkes. He remained stubbornly on his perch, and seemed completely unaware of the tension and grief in the room. He was preening his tail feathers. From what he had seen in the Pensieve, Fawkes had brought Harry the sorting hat, from which he could draw Gryffindor's sword. But Fawkes was still here. "Albus," Mr. Weasley said, "are you sure that you don't know who is opening the chamber?" He had asked this question several times before. Albus knew where he was leading, but refused to allow thoughts and conversations to drift that way. "No, I do not," he lied. "We have been conducting an investigation, of course, but nothing has been conclusive." Arthur Weasley grimaced as though he were in physical pain. "My daughter is down there," he stated, "and we don't know why, or who, or how." "Albus, you're certain that it isn't?" Thankfully, Minerva McGonagall took that moment to pound on the door and, without waiting for a reply, pushed it open. Her face was set in grim lines. Albus had not seen her quite so undone since she, and Hagrid had left Harry on the doorstep of number 4, Privet Drive. There was a movement from behind her, and Hermione Granger stepped out, tears streaking down her face. Minerva set a hand on her shoulder. "We have." She glanced over at Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and looked away, as though she could not bear to see their grief a moment longer. "We have several more students missing, Albus." Albus watched her. Several meant more than 2, which meant that Harry and Ron had possibly run into trouble before they even made it to the Chamber of Secrets. "Who?" he asked. "Harry Potter, Ron W. Weasley, and Neville Longbottom," she answered, keeping her eyes fixed on his. Mrs. Weasley screamed and fell into one of the armchairs Albus had conjured for the Weasleys. Hermione sobbed, and fresh tears tracked down her face. "I didn't even notice they were missing," she said through sobs. "Not until a few minutes before Professor Emma McGonagall came in." "It's true," Albus McGonagall said. "They are not in the dorms, nor have they been seen in the dorms or common room all this afternoon." Mr. Weasley drew himself up to his full height. "What exactly do you think is happening?" Albus suddenly felt very old. "Arthur," he said quietly. But the other man, who now had 2 children missing, ignored him. "I think we deserve to know." Is there any possible way that Harry Potter is opening the Chamber of Secrets? Harry wouldn't, Hermione cried. He wouldn't. He isn't the heir of Slytherin. I know he isn't. He has shown that he has skills beyond his second year. Arthur pressed. And he speaks Parseltongue, like Slytherin. I saw his face when he looked at that Umbridge woman. He was not only angry, he wanted to kill her. I don't believe he wanted to kill her, Albus lied. He had just had some very nasty allegations leveled at him. Both he and your son did. And Harry just SS studies more. Hermione said, her face bright red. Hermione, Arthur said, I appreciate your loyalty to your friend, but if you have seen anything suspicious, anything at all, you need to tell me now. She shook her head silently. Albus wanted to applaud her. Obviously, the three-time travelers had loved this one so desperately, for good reason. Loyal and brave, a true Gryffindor. He glanced over at where Fawkes still stood on his perch. He had thought he'd seen the phoenix move out of the corner of his eye, but that had only been wishful thinking. Where were you when you last saw them? Arthur asked. It was all right after Transfiguration, she answered at once. Why did they leave you? They said they had a detention with Professor Snape, she said. Albus closed his eyes. Did you see them leave for the dungeons? Minerva asked. No, she answered. They ran off. Albus, Minerva turned to him. I'm quite certain that Weasley and Potter did not have detention with Professor Snape today. We had our staff meeting for the teachers this morning, and he did not say a word about it. He generally gloats. Perhaps they forgot the day, Albus murmured, though he knew that this was not nearly enough to halt what was now going to happen. Harry, where are you? This was right after Transfiguration. Minerva asked sharply, right before Ginny Weasley was taken into the chamber. Yes, Hermione said hesitantly. Which direction did they run off to? They ran toward the hospital wing, she said reluctantly. Which is also the direction of that bathroom, Arthur said. His face slowly flushed to a bright red. Molly's sobs were slowing, and she finally looked up. Her brown eyes flashed with anger and grief. I told you, Hermione said bravely. Harry would never hurt Ginny, and Ron would be the last person to hurt his sister. Unless he had his will taken away, Molly said sharply. Potter knows about the Imperius curse. It could be another spell he practices on Ron. Silence fell over the headmaster's office, and Albus wanted to put his head in his hands. He had only one ally in this room. One person who did not, on some level, suspect Harry, and she was only 13 years old. Fawkes trilled. It was a sound that usually had the ability to comfort him beyond anything else. But now it made him uneasy and wary, because Fawkes should have been gone hours ago. Where was Harry on the night of Halloween? Arthur asked. He was in the common room, she answered. In the common room, he said flatly. Why wasn't he at the feast? He said he didn't feel well, Hermione said. Ginny didn't feel well either. Albus stared at the girl, willing her to remain strong, willing her trust in Harry not to break. The other adults exchanged significant looks. He did not want to remain silent any longer, but he could not possibly tell them why he trusted Harry, Ron, and Ginny beyond all doubt. It was far, far too soon. All of them knew it. He had enough time. That explains why they were both. If he's hurt Ron and Ginny, we'll get to the bottom of this. I assure you. Thank you, Minerva. When he returns to the common room, I'll ensure that he gives us satisfactory answers. Miss Granger. Hermione started and looked away. They both had been completely silent while the others had damned Harry. The evidence they had, going by what they had seen and witnessed, was damning, he had to admit. If Harry did not return, Albus feared that he would be remembered as the student who had killed several others. Albus closed his eyes again, feeling for the first time since he was 18 years old, utterly impotent. Return to your common room, Minerva said. Come straight back to us if Potter returns. Do you understand? He didn't do. Miss Granger, you have never been one to directly disobey an order from a teacher. Do not start tonight. Minerva threatened, her lips a thin line. Hermione left, closing the door quietly behind her. Harry Potter is not opening the Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore said firmly. How can you possibly believe that he isn't? Molly flared up at once. Everything points to it. His mysterious absence from the feast on Halloween, his knowledge of advanced spells, the fact that he made Ron run with him right before my daughter was taken into the chamber. How can you possibly believe otherwise? You don't even know Potter, Minerva pointed out. You've only spoken to him once. Yes, Albus admitted, right after he saved the Philosopher's Stone from Lord Voldemort. This has nothing to do with you-know-who, Arthur said. It has everything to do with Voldemort. He stared around at them and felt the horrible certainty that things are going to get worse, a lot worse, before they got better. If Harry managed to save Ginny, if he was not dead, then suspicion would be deflected. But what he saw on these people's faces was not momentary. It had its roots in that damn article. The shadow of the Chosen One's terrible power was like a presence in the room, feeding the distrust until it became surety. It would not go away, not really, until the truth was told, which would, unfortunately, be years. That is, if Harry survived this night. What is happening? As soon as the thought crossed his mind, Fawkes let out a loud cry. He spread his graceful wings the color of flame, leapt into the air, grabbed the sorting hat from its shelf, and disappeared in a bright flash of fire.
Welcome back to the page, Harry Potter fans. Here we are with Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker, Chapter 12, Just a Memory.
Chapter 12, Just a Memory. Chapter text. Harry blinked. He stared down at a filthy ground covered in bones. He moved his hand, and it squelched in the muck. What the dash? As soon as the thought struck, he felt a wave of dizziness crash over him, a great vast thing that started at his head and pushed with unrelenting force. He barely managed to turn his head in time to avoid spraying his own hands with vomit. He heaved and heaved while his stomach clenched painfully. Harry, Ron's voice. Lockhart, Ron. He's bleeding from his ears, Neville said. What did you do to him? Just stunned him, Ron said indifferently. Might be more powerful because I used 2 wands. Harry retched. The voices sounded as though they came from very far away, as though he were underwater. What's going on? Why were he and Ron and Neville in a place littered with the remains of small animals and smelled like an open sewage pipe? He dropped onto his forearms and threw up again. Harry, Ron said urgently. Get up, come on. Ron, Neville said with a shaky voice. Lockhart needs help. Lockhart, Ron said viciously, is lucky that I didn't kill him. He just obliviated Harry. Where are we? Harry rasped. Ron swore. We're in the Chamber of Secrets, near it, anyway. What? Harry said blankly. The Chamber of Secrets. Ron said desperately. You don't remember. You don't effing remember. He walked over and kicked Lockhart in the shins. Hard. Neville squeaked. I can't. And Harry hated how thin his voice sounded. The tidal wave of nausea closed over him, and he squeezed his eyes shut. Wake up! Wake up! Ron was yelling in his ear and slapping his cheeks. Ron, Harry asked. Somehow he had lain down on the ground, but he'd only blinked, hadn't he? To keep from vomiting again? Stop hitting me. I just blinked. You didn't just blink, Ron said. You've been out for Merlin knows how long. About half an hour, Neville said helpfully. Listen, Ron said. Pull yourself together. My sister needs you. Ginny's in here. He tried to get up, but his legs felt limp. Instead, he gripped Ron's robes and pulled himself up halfway. How'd she get here? Why? What did we do? Damn it, Harry. Ron snarled. He lifted Harry up by his robes, set him on his feet, and shook him like a rag doll. Lockhart obliviated you. Was that why his brain felt like someone had taken a hammer to it? He was supposed to be here. He just forgot? He took several deep breaths. Now that he wasn't so close to the floor, he found it easier to breathe. Lockhart, their defense professor, who was completely useless but was too, well, stupid to be a threat, had obliviated him? Ron, Harry said in a low voice, flicking his eyes toward Neville, who was bent over a still form. Professor Lockhart. Ginny's in there. You remember Ginny? Ron said cautiously. I'll always remember Ginny, Harry said quietly. He knew Ron would get it. Ron moaned with relief. Thank Merlin, he said. I didn't know how much he'd taken from you. I was going barmy. He sagged against the wall of the tunnel as though his legs were barely supporting him. Harry knew the feeling. What's in here? Harry asked. A basilisk, Ron said. That's a giant snake. See that skin over there? That's where it came from. Don't look at it. It'll kill you. And its fangs are poisonous, too. Harry gaped at him. And Ginny's in there with it. Why hadn't they tried to stop this from happening? What kind of horrible mistake had they made? Harry, Ron sounded quite desperate. You got to go. Aren't, Harry licked his lips. Aren't you coming with me? I can't. I don't speak parcel tongue, Ron said. What the hell is parcel tongue? Harry asked. He was trembling now. Whether it was from fear or confusion, he did not know. You can talk to snakes, Neville said. Once Ron's silence made it clear that he could not speak at the moment. That's how he got down here. You hissed something. Ron said it was open. But, he said seriously, you don't have to go alone, Harry. I'll go with you. Ron's fist slammed against the wall. No, you're staying here with me. I've got to keep an eye on Lockhart. BB, but I see could go with Harry, Neville said. His face appeared completely bloodless in the flickering light coming from the two wands Ron held in his hands. You can handle him if he wakes up. Exactly, Ron said. You're going to keep me from killing him if he wakes up. I have to go alone. Harry asked. There was a hint of a plea in his voice that he hated. But he had no idea where he was and what to do. How were basilisks defeated? He glanced down at his wand. Was there a spell that Lockhart had made him forget? Yeah, Ron said. You speak parcel tongue, he added lamely. Harry gazed at him for long moments. His best mate's blue eyes were wide. He was furious, Harry realized. He had obviously not been joking when he'd told Neville that the other boy would have to stop him from killing Lockhart. Listen, he dragged Harry further up the tunnel, away from Neville, who was staring at them. There's a diary, he whispered. It's like the locket, like the cup. Do you understand? So not only was there a basilisk in there with Ginny, but a Horcrux as well? All right, Harry nodded. It served to shake out the rest of the cobwebs in his head, but he could almost feel the blankness there. I'm going. Any other words of advice? Ron said. Please hurry. Harry set off down the tunnel at once. Neville said something, but Harry didn't respond. Nor did he look back. Ginny was somewhere up ahead, at the mercy of both a basilisk and a Horcrux. Once he could no longer hear Ron's and Neville's voices, he paused to empty his stomach once more. He rested his head against the smooth, wet stone for a moment. Then, every limb shaking, from nerves or anger, he couldn't tell, he continued on. Further and further he went, until he came to a round door engraved with snakes. They almost seemed to move. Harry eyed it. If he could talk to snakes, could he talk to fake snakes, too? They almost seemed alive. Their eyes gleamed at him. Open, he said. It sounded like a hiss. He was not surprised to see that it slid out of the way, revealing the vast room beyond. Wand pointed straight in front of him. He entered. He was in a long hallway. He looked up and could not see the ceiling. Columns stretched up and up into darkness. He walked steadily forward and saw that the room eventually opened up. There was a large statue of a man, and laying face down before it was Ginny, her hair gleaming like fire. He sprinted toward her, and his footsteps echoed, sounding like he was leading an army. But it was only him. He knelt beside her and gently turned her over. Don't be dead, don't be dead, don't be dead, don't be dead, he pleaded over and over again to whomever might be listening. Ginny, he muttered. She was alive. She looked as though she was sleeping. Her chest rose and fell steadily, and her cheeks were a bit flushed. He shook her shoulder. Ginny, he said desperately. Wake up, wake up. Something made him turn around. He thought he'd heard a sound, like someone else was here with them. All he saw was a shadow that somehow seemed malevolent. It seemed like it was breathing. He pointed his wand at her. Enervate, he said loudly. But still, she remained unconscious. He could not imagine what had made him think she was sleeping. Her unnatural stillness was just as frightening as the shadow. Next to her was a small black book. It was the diary that Ron had mentioned, the Horcrux. He picked it up and stared at it with loathing. This was somehow doing it to her. He knew it. He racked his memories, trying to recall if he had ever seen a Horcrux act in this manner. It had changed Ron, had fed his negativity, and had contributed to him leaving Harry and Hermione alone. But he hadn't known it could do this, and even if it had, he'd been obliviated. He paced back and forth, and time marched on with agonizing speed. He examined his memories, and grew ever more furious when he came upon blank spots. He remembered the Horcruxes, all of them but this diary, but he could not remember how some of them had been destroyed. He knew that Fiendfire could do it, but when he thought back to Hufflepuff's cup and how it had been destroyed, he came up blank. Same with the ring. In the first timeline, Dumbledore had done it, but how? He had no idea how much time had passed. He suspected it had been a long time, too long. He looked down at Ginny, and his heart leapt into his throat. Her cheeks were pale now, and her breathing had become faint. I'm going to screw this up, he thought, and Ginny's going to die. He stroked her hair. He was tempted to unleash Fiendfire and destroy the diary, but he had no way of controlling the vicious flames. Harry Potter, a boy about 16 years old, had stepped out of the shadows. No, Harry blinked. He didn't step out of the shadows. The shadow was him all along, and the shadows still clung to him, as if the boy before him was more smoke than flesh. "Who are you?" he asked. "Tom Riddle," the boy said. "Voldemort." Harry gaped at him. What are you doing here?" he asked. "That's an interesting question," Voldemort said. "But I'm afraid that it's your turn to answer some questions. Questions I've had since that stupid little girl began writing in me." "Sorry," Harry said recklessly. "I'm not really in the mood." He pointed his wand straight at the Horcrux that was somehow becoming flesh. He looked down at Ginny again. She seemed even paler and weaker, while the Horcrux grew stronger. "He's stealing her life." Voldemort laughed. It was a high, cold sound that had resonated in Harry's dreams for almost 2 decades. He had laughed just the same way after he had killed Harry's parents. "You can't kill me with your wand, Potter," he said. "And unless you want to hasten your own death, by all means, I can call the basilisk, and you can finally die. Is that how I can speak Parseltongue?" Harry asked himself. Voldemort can speak Parseltongue, and since I'm a Horcrux, I can too? "Fine," Harry said. "She told me all about you, you know," Voldemort said. "How the greatest sorcerer ever lived was defeated by a baby. You, tell me how." "My mother died for me," Harry told him after a moment. He clutched his wand, mentally cataloging the spells that might work against a basilisk. But if he couldn't look at it without risking death, like Ron had said, how could he aim? "And you aren't the greatest wizard in the world, Voldemort. Albus Dumbledore is." Riddle opened his mouth, perhaps to ask how Harry had known who he was, when the most beautiful sound he had ever heard filled the chamber. It was Phoenix Song, and for the first time since he had left Ron and Neville, Harry felt a measure of hope. Fawkes was here. The Phoenix dropped something misshapen and lumpy at Harry's feet. He recognized it at once, the Sorting Hat. Thanks, Fawkes," he said. Fawkes trilled and spread his beautiful wings and soared back up into the darkness. Harry watched Voldemort as he laughed. The truth be told, Harry had no idea why Fawkes had seen fit to bring him the Sorting Hat. He could not see the possible use in this situation. But perhaps Dumbledore had sent Fawkes. Maybe there was a note in there that described how best to kill basilisks, or maybe how to control Fiendfire. Harry examined the Sorting Hat while Voldemort continued to laugh. There was nothing there, nothing. "Well," Voldemort said, "if that's the best the old man can do. Time to die, Potter." Harry glanced down at Ginny. He didn't know how he could possibly do it, but he couldn't fail her. Always and always. He tore his eyes away from her as Voldemort called the basilisk. "Kill him," he said in a sibilant voice. Harry ran. He ran to put distance between himself and Ginny, to draw the basilisk away from her. He could hear it sliding behind him, and the faint splashes as more and more of it came out of the pool of water that had surrounded the statue. It seemed endless. If he could just get behind one of the columns, he had about one good chance. He might try Sectum Sempra and cut off its head before its eyes could kill him. Or its fangs. A stream of light flew over Harry as he ran headlong for the columns. "Fawkes!" He heard another trill, this one angry instead of comforting, and the basilisk shrieked. The sound sent ripples of fear down his entire body. He had never known that a snake could make such a sound, and he hoped never to hear it again. He was almost where he could send off one good spell when he tripped and fell hard on the unforgiving surface. His vision blurred when he hit his jaw on a rock, and he watched with horror when his wand flew out of his grasp and rolled away. Whatever Fox had done to the basilisk, it had not stopped it for long. He could hear the impossibly long body gliding on the floor. "Kill him, you stupid beast!" Voldemort shouted. "Use your fangs." Harry hoped this meant that Fox had taken out its eyes. He stared at where his wand had been thrown, but he could not see it from this angle, and judging by the loud slither, he did not have time to grab it. He had one last chance. He jammed the Sorting Hat down on his head and thought "help" as loud as he could. Perhaps Dumbledore could hear him. He could save Ginny even if Harry could not. Something heavy came out of the Sorting Hat, landing on top of his head with enough force to blacken the edges of his vision. He ripped the hat off his head, grabbed whatever it was, and rolled over onto his back. He took a quick look at what the Sorting Hat had given him, and with a surge of hope, he saw that it was a sword. The hope changed to fierce determination when he sensed the shadow of the basilisk looming over him. He got up on one knee. That was all he had time for, and grasping the sword in both hands, he lifted it. The huge maw of the basilisk opened before him, and he caught a quick look at the glistening fangs before he thrust the sword up. He felt resistance, and he pushed with all his might, his arms quivering with effort. He chanced to glance up and saw the tip of the sword protruding from the tip of the basilisk's head, right between two bleeding eye sockets. He yanked as hard as he could and rolled away at the same time. He almost made it. A fang punched into his arm, and pain immediately tore through his body. The basilisk convulsed as it died and lodged the fang in deeper. Harry took great gasps of air, and with all of his willpower, ripped it out of his arm. "No!" Voldemort shouted. Harry staggered to his feet, sword still in hand, and kept his eyes on Ginny's hair. He weakened with each step, but he forced himself to continue. When he could no longer walk, he crawled, while Voldemort laughed. And then Harry could no longer move. He closed his eyes, and he could feel tears seep out from behind his eyelids. Something heavy landed on his back, but he had no strength to dislodge it. Everything became fuzzy, and there was a ringing in his ears like the whistle of a train. But then, amidst the burning agony of where the fang had punctured his arm, he felt cool moisture, and the pain receded. The whistle, which had grown louder, faded once more, and Harry was able to open his eyes. "Get away from him, bird!" The weight lifted off his back, and Harry stood on strengthened legs. He was only 5 feet from Ginny, and as soon as he saw the diary, he knew what to do. It was his only chance. If this sword did not destroy the Horcrux, then Harry had no other options. "Stop!" But he ignored Voldemort, lifted the sword when he was still 3 feet away, and plunged it down, cleaving the diary in two. There was a terrible scream, and Harry turned his head as the riddle that had come out of the diary disappeared. He sat down and gently pulled Ginny into his lap. "Please wake up," he murmured. "Please wake up. Please wake up." Tears trickled down his cheeks as long moments that seemed to stretch forever went by. Finally, she stirred. "Harry," she sighed, blinking her eyes open. "I thought you were dead," he said. She sat up, apparently none the worse for wear, although seconds ago Harry had feared that she would die. She frowned at him. "Are you crying? Aren't I the one supposed to be doing that? I thought you were going to die. I didn't know if I could save you," he told her. Then he pressed kisses on every inch of her face that he could reach. She squeaked when he hid an open eye. "Harry, you knew I would be safe," she said. "You're trembling." She sounded as though she couldn't believe it. "Last time, you weren't nearly so." "I don't remember last time," Harry said. She stared at him, eyes wide with shock. "Lockhart obliviated me. Ron told me. I came in here and saw you. You were dying, and I had no idea what I could possibly do." "Lockhart?" Ginny asked. "You'll have to ask Ron and Neville the details," Harry said. "There are huge blank spots in my memory. Why did we let this happen, Ginny?" Ginny looked at the sword he'd thrown aside when he'd destroyed the diary. "We needed that sword, Harry, badly enough to let this happen again. It destroys Horcruxes now. We need it." When we first started planning to come back, Dumbledore told us that to attempt to destroy them, we couldn't rely on fiend fire, especially when we have to kill the snake and destroy the cup. He sighed. He felt exhausted all of a sudden. He pressed a kiss to her hair. From now on, we fight side by side, he said firmly. She smiled at him. When we can. But I'll tell you this. I'm not going to do this again. Ever. No, you aren't. She sighed and put her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until Harry felt his legs falling asleep. We have to go, Harry murmured. Ron will be going spare? I have no idea how long I've been here. Hours, probably. What were you doing? She asked. Apparently waiting for a phoenix to bring me an old hat, he said dryly. She stood and grasped his hand, pulling him to his feet. He bent over and picked up what remained of the Horcrux and the sword. He looked at it and wrinkled his nose. Couldn't we have just bought a sword? Ginny laughed. It's Gryffindor's sword, Harry. You can't just buy it. You have to prove that you're courageous and that you've got nerve. I don't think I've ever felt less brave in my life, Harry said. That's probably why you got it. They made their way quickly through the chamber. Ginny held the diary, and Harry held the sword. Fawkes glided silently above them, making it unnecessary to light one of their wands. It seemed to take much longer than it had. They heard Ron shouting before they even came close to seeing him. Either Ron was yelling very loud, or the acoustics in the tunnel were amazing. Harry suspected it might be both. We're here, Harry called. Then, instead of shouting, he heard footsteps running toward him and saw faint, bobbing lights. Ron ran fast, and he gripped first Ginny and then Harry in a bone-crushing hug. I thought you were dead. Almost, Harry said. You've been gone for almost 3 hours. Where's Lockhart? Ginny asked. Back there with Neville, Ron said. Suddenly, Harry felt a rage so intense that it frightened him. Without looking at the other two, he strode ahead, wand raised. Lockhart had taken away his memories, had violated Harry, and had nearly ruined everything. He raised the sword as soon as he saw him. Neville gasped, Harry. Harry wanted to kill Lockhart very badly. He stared at the man for almost a minute. He was lying very still and motionless. Is he dead? And no, Neville said. He even woke up, but he keeps going back to sleep. I've even been trying to, help him. Harry did not like knowing that he probably would have killed Lockhart had Neville not been there. He lowered his wand and the sword. Neville could not possibly understand. He did not know of the time travel, did not know that Lockhart could have destroyed everything. It was only luck that Harry had retained his memories. He remembered very clearly that Lockhart had intended, the first time, to destroy Ron's and Harry's minds. But Neville could not possibly know, and Harry felt ashamed when Neville looked at him with something like fear. Sorry, Neville, Harry said. He really scrambled my brains. Neville looked so relieved that Harry felt even guiltier. That's okay, Harry, he said. Fawkes flew around a corner in the tunnel, and Neville gaped at him. Is that a phoenix? Yeah, Harry chuckled a little. He saved my life. Ginny and Ron came around the corner then. Neville sighed with relief. We thought you were dead, he said. Both of you. You were gone for so long. We're fine. Ginny's voice shook. Harry looked closer and saw that there were tears in her eyes. I don't know how we're going to get B back, though. She glared at Lockhart's prone shape, and Harry realized that her tears were more from anger than anything else. Phoenixes are supposed to be really strong, Neville said tentatively. Maybe this one can help us. I don't know how it'll manage Lockhart, though. Can we leave him down here? Ron asked. He laughed. Apparently Ron had worked through his anger. The fact that Harry and Ginny were safe probably helped. It took the combined effort of Ron, Harry, and Neville to carry Lockhart to the pipe that led back to Hogwarts. Ron dropped his feet with a curse. They lined up behind Harry and the Phoenix. Ginny gripped his hand. Ron gripped his sister's shoulder and, with extreme reluctance, picked up one of Lockhart's feet again. Neville kept his hand under Lockhart's armpit. Without further ado, Harry grasped one of Foxtail feathers. He felt unbelievably light, and then they were soaring up and up through the pipe, and it took what seemed like no time at all to find themselves in a familiar-looking bathroom. Didn't Dumbledore say that he'd be in his office? Harry asked for Neville's benefit. Yeah, Ron said, I think we're supposed to follow that phoenix. Harry reluctantly dropped Ginny's hand, and they followed Fawkes into the dimly lit corridor. Harry, Ron said, help us with this git. Harry sighed and doubled back to grab the arm that Neville did not hold. It seemed to take forever, and by the time they reached the gargoyle, Harry's back was one massive ache. He thought several times about just dropping Lockhart and letting him be. With every step that Harry took, the resentment of having his mind violated grew. While he knew that Obliviate was useful, when used as a weapon for greed, it was nearly as bad as the Imperius curse. As soon as they stepped on to the moving staircase that led to Dumbledore's office, Harry dropped Lockhart with a huge sigh of relief. The relief faded quickly when he heard raised voices. They were muffled by the heavy oak door, but he could hear Mrs. Weasley's voice and Mr. Weasley's in a lower, steadier voice that was almost certainly Dumbledore's. Don't care about a phoenix. That's Mum, Ron whispered, his eyes wide. He took our daughter and our son, and I am not standing here a moment longer. Harry had the horrible suspicion that Mrs. Weasley was not talking about Tom Riddle. He took a deep breath. He was about to push it open when footsteps rushed toward him from the other side, and the door crashed open. He stared at Mrs. Weasley, who looked thoroughly disheveled, and her eyes narrowed in anger and fear the moment her attention was caught by the scar on his forehead. The instant before she sent a hex at him, Harry knew the signs. She caught sight of her children, who stood and stared silently at her, looks of shock written clearly across their faces. Ginny, Ron, she whispered faintly. What? Ginny burst into tears, and Harry had no idea if she was acting or not. He didn't look at her, but skirted around Mrs. Weasley and entered the room. Lockhart's hurt, he said. Mr. Weasley and Professor McGonagall simply stared at him, mouths open in shock. He could imagine the picture he made. He was covered in muck and blood, his robes were torn, and he carried a sword in one hand and a wand in the other. With an effort, Harry turned away from Mr. Weasley, whose look of extreme anger had melted into bewilderment when Ron, Ginny, and Neville came in behind him. Dumbledore was beaming at him, and he looked at Harry with pride, relief, and concern. Ginny still cried, and had her face hidden in her robes. I think, McGonagall said weakly, clutching her chest. I think we need an explanation. Harry glanced at Ron. There was no way that he could explain anything, not with the gaping holes in his memory. So Ron spun the lie that they had practiced over and over again. He told them how Harry had heard voices in the walls, but they'd written it off as Harry being injured. Then, he told them that they'd begun to suspect something was wrong at the school when the chamber was opened, and the first message was left on the walls. And after the two students had been petrified and Harry had admitted to hearing that voice again, Ron said that he thought of a basilisk. It was a snake, and since Harry was the only Parseltongue in the school, he was the only one who could hear it. They didn't tell their other friends because they weren't sure, but Harry had heard the voice again just that afternoon. They'd lied and said that they had detention with Snape, but really they had been following the voice that came from the walls. Harry kept his eyes on Dumbledore, ready to interrupt Ron if he said anything that would be known for a lie. But Dumbledore only nodded his head every once in a while. He didn't believe a word of it. He knew the truth, but the lies sounded enough like truth to make it believable. Then Ron said firmly, We heard Professor McGonagall say that Ginny'd entered some girl's bathroom, and we reckoned that the Chamber of Secrets was in there. So we went and ran into Neville and Lockhart on the way, and they came with us. Then Harry made the Sinks move when he talked to them in Parseltongue, and there was a tunnel. That is all very well and good, Mr. Weasley, said McGonagall, who had apparently recovered from the shock. But it was very irresponsible of you not to alert teacher. Ron looked pointedly at Lockhart. He's the defense against the dark arts teacher, he said reasonably. Neville looked at him quickly, but then looked away. McGonagall narrowed her eyes at him. She refrained from saying what they all knew she wished to say, but asked instead, And why are you being so quiet, Mr. Potter? Because Lockhart obliviated me, Harry said quietly. Yeah, Ron said. We were already in the tunnel when Lockhart knocked Neville over and stole his wand. Before I could do anything, he stole all of Harry's memories. Then Harry was really sick. Dumbledore looked at Harry sharply with a question in his eyes. Harry shook his head an infinitesimal amount. He sat back. I take it you remember everything from that point on? Yes, Harry said, and then it was his turn to talk. He told them everything, and he only omitted the knowledge of the Horcruxes that he had from the future and his reaction to Ginny waking up. Everyone sat in rapt silence, even Ron and Neville. So I did the only thing I hadn't tried yet. She was holding in her hands, and I used the sword to cut it in half. The shadow of Voldemort disappeared, and Ginny woke up. I'm SS sorry, Ginny cried. I didn't know. It is quite all right, Miss Weasley, Dumbledore said quietly. Strong. Adult wizards have been enchanted by Voldemort as well. There was no lasting damage done. I expect that Madame Pomfrey will have the Mandra potion ready in no time. There will be no punishment. I expect that a stay in the hospital wing for tonight will suffice, and perhaps some hot chocolate? Ginny nodded. Thank you. The Weasleys left, all except Ron, who was glaring at Lockhart again. Harry could tell that he wanted to give the prone professor a good kick. Harry was actually starting to feel a little worried about the professor. Had Ron killed him with the force of 2 wands casting the stunning spell? Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore said, I think Gilderoy needs attention from the hospital wing. If you could, she nodded sharply and used her wand to levitate Lockhart gently. I'll leave you to deal with Potter, Weasley, and Longbottom. Mr. Longbottom, Dumbledore said, it is my belief that you went along for the ride. You may go tell the others in Gryffindor Tower what has happened here this night. Neville nodded. Thank you, Professor, he said quietly. Mr. Longbottom, Dumbledore added, for your bravery and willingness to help a fellow student and friend. 100 points to Gryffindor. They waited a few moments after Neville left, just to be sure that he was out of earshot. Then Ron's anger exploded with the force of a small bomb. That effing idiot obliviated Harry, he shouted. His face matched his hair. I thought that Harry had been wiped senseless, like Lockhart did to himself last time. He was sick, and then he passed out for half an hour. He had no idea where he was, what he was doing. And you remember everything? Dumbledore said. Everything besides the chamber, that is? Yes, Harry said. But there are holes in my memory in other places. Ginny said that we used the sword to destroy Horcruxes, and that was the reason why we did this. Thank Merlin, Ron said. I was going barmy. I think I might have to apologize to Neville. I told Ginny, Harry said solidly. And this counts for you too, Ron. I told her that there may be things that I've got to do on my own, but the rest of the time I want you there. No more using each other as bait. I agree, Dumbledore said quietly. When I fight, you fight, Ron said. And when you fight, I fight. Mostly anyway. Always and always, Harry said. The days slid by quickly after that, and Harry felt such an overwhelming feeling of peace, only punctured by the anger he felt toward Lockhart, and he was able to express that fully when he was alone with Ginny and Ron, who were even angrier than he was, that many people remarked upon his good mood. He threw himself with renewed fervor into the small group he had started with Neville, Hermione, Luna, Ron, and Ginny. Things were progressing there even better than ever. Hermione, who had run up to him at the feast after Harry had slain the basilisk and thrown her arms around him and Ron, had been extremely upset about what she called unfounded accusations. Apparently she had, at some point, spoken to the Weasleys, Dumbledore, and McGonagall while Harry was in the chamber. The fact that adults she trusted were willing to believe the worst in Harry had prompted her to newer heights in her spellcasting ability. Neville was also very enthusiastic about learning in a room of requirement. And if he sometimes stared at Harry and Ron with a perplexed look on his face, Harry brushed it off as an unfortunate side effect of almost murdering Lockhart in front of him. Luna, however, approached the baby Dumbledore's army with the same not-quite-attentiveness that she did everything else. And, even better than all of that, Lucius Malfoy had attended another of the Slytherin Quidditch games. And he brought Dobby. He'd brushed by Malfoy, past the sock Harry had taken off when he noticed the white blonde hair, and Malfoy, predictably, had thrown it, and Dobby had caught it. He'd laughed at Malfoy's threats, and told him they were even. Then he had walked away, a stunned and happy Dobby following him. The only worry that steadily grew on Harry's mind as April died was the fact that Sirius Black had not attempted to contact Harry. He knew he was out. Dumbledore had confirmed it. Kingsley Shacklebolt, an old friend of his and hopefully a future friend of Harry's, had been the one to take his release papers to Azkaban. He'd seen him, given him all the information he'd need to re-enter society as a free man, went with him to Gringotts to reopen his account, found him lodgings at the Leaky Cauldron, and had promised to return the next day. By the time he'd returned, Sirius had already disappeared. "Have you found Sirius yet?" Harry asked half-heartedly in the middle of May. He'd asked Dumbledore every time they met in the Room of Requirement. "Not yet." Dumbledore shook his head. "This isn't like Sirius," Ginny murmured. "I would have thought he'd be pounding on the doors of Hogwarts, demanding to see Harry the day after he was released." "Maybe Sirius is a little balmier this time around," Ron muttered. "May I try to find him?" Snape said snidely. "And oh," for people shouted. "I will continue doing everything I can," Dumbledore said. "I've set a ward around Grimmauld Place. It'll alert me if he goes anywhere near it. I've got contacts watching for him, mainly Mundungus Fletcher. Did Remus say anything when you interviewed him for the job?" Harry asked desperately. Unfortunately, this was the third time he had asked, and he knew that the answer was no. "No, Harry," Dumbledore said patiently. Remus was quite unwilling to talk about Sirius at all. In fact, he had enough tact, not to mention the fact that he had already told Harry this several times. "Damn it," Harry said loudly. He wanted to kick something. He looked around and saw a simple vase sitting on a table he had not noticed. Without hesitating, he seized it and threw it against the wall. It shattered gratifyingly. Harry wondered if the Room of Requirement had amplified the sound a little. "Harry, I assure you that he will not be able to hide for long," Dumbledore said. "He hid from the Ministry for almost 2 years," Ginny pointed out, "before he went to Grimmauld Place. He wasn't hiding from me." "Just find him," Harry pleaded. "We need him.